This are the Klipsch Cornwall 3s. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about the Klipsch Cornwall 3s. Today's video is sponsored by Sith Audio Audiophile Stereo Goggles. When you're 72 years old and you need to read those liner notes, get yourself a pair of Sith Audio Audiophile glasses. How much are they? $17.99. $17.99.99. That's right, Sith Audio Audiophile Stereo Goggles. Available in limited quantities. Thank you, Sith Audio. I am at a dear friend's home, hanging out with him, listening to his Cornwalls 3. So this is not the latest generation. This is the third generation. The Cornwalls are able to go down to 34 hertz all the way up to 20,000 hertz, have a sensitivity of 102 dB, and we've actually got it on a Deckware Zen Triode amp. It only puts out 2.5 watts, and guess what? It gets as loud as we need it to be in here. Nominal impedance of 8 ohms, has crossovers at 5,000 hertz and 800 hertz. The tweeter is a titanium diaphragm compression driver. Midrange is a titanium diaphragm compression driver. And the woofer is a fiber composite cone woofer. Enclosure is 36 inches high, 25 inches wide, and 15 inches deep. And they weigh a svelte 98 pounds apiece. The Cornwall actually comes from corner placement. I didn't know this till literally right now. So they were designed to go into a corner or right up against the wall. Actually, we have them pulled out just a little bit from the wall, probably about 3 feet if you're looking right at the middle of the speaker and going all the way to the back wall. And it really brought the imaging together. On the electronics, we actually have a Weem Mini going into a J2. The J2 is then going into Deckware Zen Triode amplifier. Then going out to the Cornwalls, actually controlling volume digitally from the Weem Mini. So it looks like you can still get these new. I'm looking at a listing on Hi-Fi Heaven for $21.99 a piece. You can get them in American Walnut, Black Ash, or Cherry. So for $4,400, you can get a new pair of Klipsch Cornwall 3s. Let's talk about Soundstage and Imaging. As far as Soundstage and Imaging goes, we had these kind of facing straight out and very close to the wall, but we also had this on a variety of electronics. Once we pulled these out from the wall and towed them in a little bit, not directly at the center position when we're sitting here, Soundstage got very deep, very wide, very good, very quickly. We were listening to Stevie Ray Vaughan, Roughest Place on Earth. The center imaging of the rim hit of the snare drum was dead center. Anyway, Soundstage and Imaging is great depending upon your room because we have pretty consistent sidewalls in this room. But I would get these out from the wall because these Soundstage and Image a lot better a little bit further from the wall than they do right on the wall or right on the corners. Let's talk about bass. So we're listening to 3 tracks. So What by Miles Davis off of Kind of Blue. We listened to Killing Strangers by Marilyn Manson. And of course we listened to Intergalactic by the Beastie Boys. First we listened to it on the Deckware Zen Triode 25th anniversary. And then we put on the Carver M400A. This is some very eclectic equipment because I'm not at my house and the proprietor of this hi-fi museum has very refined taste. Mine is very pedestrian in comparison. But what I really wanted to do is hear the difference between 2 watts of tube power and how many watts? 200 watts per channel on a solid state. And there was definite differences. The biggest difference and the easiest way to describe it is the solid state amp had more dynamics and a little bit more bass punch. Not a ton though. That's what really surprised me about the Deckware amp is it still had some good bass. It didn't have the control, the ability to start and stop the bass as well as the Carver did though. This speaker overall is neither bassy nor is it thin, and there was still enough bass even through 2 watts of tube power. But when we put the Carver on, there was a lot more punch, and there was also a lot more control over the bass. Tonally, I actually kind of liked well, let me back up. Tonally on Miles Davis, I liked it better on the Deckware. I just thought it was a little bit more magical, I guess you could say. The Carver was a little bit more what I am used to. Interestingly enough too, on Soundstage and Imaging, I thought the solid state actually, it imaged and soundstaged a little bit differently, but it was more definitive than the Deckware. The Deckware kind of just threw things out, where the Carver threw things in a specific place. So with a 15-inch woofer, it's not a huge throw, so there's not a ton of movement on this woofer. It doesn't have a huge surround, but I think this is just well balanced when it comes to the bass. I never felt like the bass was covering up any type of mid-range clarity. If I had my druthers, maybe there'd be a little bit more oomph, but I also didn't mess around with tone controls at all or messed with any EQ. I'm really impressed actually with the bass. It's kind of the perfect amount. And if it was in my room, my house, I may play around with it a little bit, but even 2-3 feet out in the room, this is still gonna give most people enough bass. At least it did for me. I won't call myself a bass head, but I do like a little junk in the trunk. Let's talk about mid-range. All right, mid-range. First of all, I think if I don't mention this, I would be doing these speakers a disservice, is the level of separation in instruments is otherworldly. I think it's on an entirely different level than I've heard any other speaker. Could be this room, but I think it's more the speaker. What I can say is I was just listening to Highway to Hell by AC/DC. Heard that song hundreds of times. The one thing that jumped out at me was when the backing vocals came in. I've never heard it separated out as well. Hello by Adele. There's a point, I think about the 10, 12 second mark, when she goes, hello, it's me. And then instead of going, it's me, she goes, it's me, and she stops. I've never heard her voice stop like that before. The mid-range clarity on this speaker is insane. It's absolutely insane. God's Gonna Cut You Down by Johnny Cash. His voice wasn't as baritone-y as other speakers I've heard, but again, the mid-range here is completely separated out, completely level, not out of place, neither forward nor recessed, and clean and clear and separated out. Redemption Song, Bob Marley. The finger plucks on the strings were palpable. And the best way I can describe this speaker's mid-range is realistic, detailed, separated. Maybe the best mid-range I've ever heard. Let's talk about treble. Santa Monica, the re-recorded version by Everclear. At the 1 minute mark, there is cymbals. Dana, jana, jana. So it's on the beat. I could hear into the treble so well that I could actually hear differences in how he was hitting the cymbals on each crash, which I've never heard before. Steve Winwood, Higher Love. At the beginning of the song, it's just a bunch of percussion. This speaker handles percussion better than any other speaker I've heard. There is a point where the drummer is hitting the rim of the snare drum, and I actually heard, I guess you would call it a bit of a mistake, where he kind of slips, and it's almost like, again, I'd never heard that before in the song. Tambourine on Hey Jude was, a lot of speakers will put that tambourine in your face a little bit. And while I think it was elevated a little bit above the mix, the ability to hear the shake and then the hit of the tambourine was spectacular. Percussion from this horn tweeter, Tractrix horn tweeter, is better controlled than any other Klipsch speaker I've heard. More realistic. This speaker also puts out a lot of air, which you can't necessarily hear until you experience the track, Dumb by Nirvana. I could hear the space of the recording. Lie in Our Graves by the Dave Matthews Band. The drummer is constantly on the snare drum throughout almost the entirety of the song, and it was just sublime. So, what are my final thoughts? Well, it's not just me. I was talking to another friend of mine here, and he said, this is the best speaker I've ever heard. I would have a tendency to agree. Now, You can power these off of a very low powered tube amp. You can, because they're over 100 dB sensitive. I wouldn't recommend it, because I think with a little bit of power, you actually lock in the imaging way better. And it's a much cleaner presentation of the music. What's ironic is on a tube, you get some, I guess, more three-dimensionality, but it's not as realistic than when you're on a solid state, because it's just putting stuff in space with a solid state. A lot hazier as far as Soundstage and Imaging from the Deckware, the Zentrad. I didn't listen to all of the tube amps available, obviously, but the difference between tubes and solid state, I would choose solid state every day of the week. Separation between instruments, between vocals, between backing vocals, is a lot of the stuff, like Dire Straits, Money for Nothing. Like, I just wanted to listen to that song just for fun to see, because I know how dynamic that song is, how it starts from here, and it just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds into the guitar solo, and I got chills. It was really amazing. At $4,200 or $4,400, if you can get these new, and you have the budget, and you have the room for these, I think you should really consider this speaker. This is the best sounding Klipsch speaker I have ever heard. It is completely balanced. Maybe some emphasis in the 4 to 6K area, but the upper mid-range is definitely not hyper-focused or hyper-forward. If you have the right track, then there is a lot of punchy bass. It's not warm. It's not cool. I would say a flawless speaker. Flawless. Actually, I didn't even want to continue doing this video because I just wanted to sit and listen to more and more songs. It's almost kind of like, let's see what it does with this song. Hall & Oates. There's 10 layers to, what is it? I can't go for that. No, 10 layers to that song if you count it. The bass comes in and then the keyboards come in. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And it just stacked the layers one on top of the other to where they were completely separated out. It's a very good song. If you haven't heard it, you should check it out. Anyway, I can't say enough about the Klipsch Cornwalls, the 3s. I haven't heard the 4s. Spectacular. 10 out of 10. So, if you want to support the channel, you can sign up for Patreon. Patreon.com/CheapAudioMan. Every Sunday night we have Patreon-only Zooms, Patreon-only Discord, Patreon-only Facebook group. You can also use the links in the description. Most of those are affiliate links, which means if you click and you buy, I get a commission. It doesn't cost you any more. Those are a great way to support the channel. You can also put a little money in the tip jar. Buy me a cup of coffee, but don't feel compelled to buy me anything with the thanks button. So, don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. If you can afford it, get yourself a pair of Klipsch Cornwalls and fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.